Real English for your daily life.
Master English together.
Quick question. Have you ever had your mind goes blank the second someone asks you for an answer?
Or you're in a meeting, everyone looks at you, and your brain just disappears for a second?
That's the worst part, because one moment you know exactly what you want to say, and then under pressure, everything feels scrambled.
And suddenly you're staring at the ceiling like it's going to help. Spoiler, it won't.
This is a B1 level episode, perfect for intermediate learners. Beginners, you're welcome too.
And if this happens to you, you're not broken or slow. You're human.
We're talking about why your mind goes blank at the worst time and why that doesn't mean you're bad at thinking.
Today, we'll look at cognitive load, work memory, and why too many choices can trap your brain in a tiny corner.
And there is one thing we discovered. Clear thinking isn't just about being smart.
It's about giving your brain less chaos so it can actually do its job.
Quick question, type a number in your head right now. How many decisions did you already make today? 5, 10, or 20?
If you're already tired just counting them, that's exactly the point. Your brain's been busy before this episode even started.
Stay until the end for our word tour 5 expressions that show up in real life when your brain freezes, when you're under pressure, and when you finally narrow down what matters.
And later, we'll give you one tiny trick to reset your thinking fast. But first, let's talk about the moment when your brain feels full and your mouth says nothing.
I once stood in a grocery aisle for so long that I nearly bought cereal I don't even like.
That's such a perfect example. Your choices get bigger, your confidence gets smaller, and then your work memory is trying to hold too much at once.
So today's episode is really about that strange gap between knowing and saying.
And by the end, you'll see why enough is enough can be a smart decision, not a weak one.
Let me take you into a very normal moment. You're in a meeting, someone says your name, and your mind goes blank.
I know that scene. Your face stays calm, but inside, it's like 5 tabs just crashed at once.
Exactly. And then you start sweating a little, your hands feel awkward, and you think, why can't I just say the thing?
Right, and now you're also noticing your own blinking, which is a terrible use of brain power.
That's where cognitive load shows up in real life. Not as a fancy theory, but as that heavy, crowded feeling.
Cognitive load theory says your brain has a limited amount of space for handling information at one time.
So, when a boss asks for an answer, the question is not just hard. It's arriving under pressure.
And under pressure, your brain starts protecting itself by narrowing the focus, sometimes too much.
That's why you can know 3 good options in the morning and forget all of them at 4 p.m.
I once spent 15 minutes choosing a notebook. 15 minutes. I was not proud.
Decision fatigue is real too. The more choices you make, the less sharp you can feel later.
And if you keep adding options, your brain doesn't feel inspired. It feels trapped.
Picture a shelf in a supermarket. You wanted tea. Then there were 12 teas. Then there were 19.
Suddenly you're holding a box with a mountain drawing on it thinking, this looks healthy, which is not a decision strategy.
I've done that with shampoo, which is even worse because the bottle says things like radiant glow and deep repair.
Every product sounds like it has a secret life. Your brain has to judge marketing, price, and your own tiredness all at once.
That is where work memory gets overloaded. It's the mental space that holds little bits of information while you think.
So if you're trying to remember the price, the brand, the return policy, and your budget, something has to drop out.
And when that happens, you don't always choose badly because you lack intelligence.
You choose badly because your brain ran out of room.
That also explains why people say the wrong thing in interviews or freeze when they're asked, "So, what do you want?"
The question can feel simple, but your mind is already busy juggling tone, timing, face, and fear of looking foolish.
I hate how personal that feels, because then people blame themselves.
And they say, "I should have known." But often they did know. They just couldn't access it fast enough.
Let's make it concrete. Imagine your friend asks, "Do you want to go out Friday, Saturday, or Sunday?"
Easy question, right? Until you're tired, hungry, and secretly hoping someone else decides for you.
So your brain starts comparing the whole weekend, the weather, your energy, the cost, the social effort.
And now the real issue isn't the day, it's the overload.
This is why just make a choice sounds simple, but doesn't help much when your work memory is already full.
Exactly, more options can mean more doubt, not more freedom.
And that's why people get stuck rereading messages before sending them. They want the perfect tone, the perfect timing, the perfect word.
Guilty. I've written one text message, deleted it, rewritten it, and then sent something less useful than the first draft.
That's not perfection. That's a tiny emotional treadmill.
And in that moment, your brain isn't lazy. It's trying to avoid risk, judgment, and regret all at once.
The tricky part is that this can look like a personality flaw from the outside.
But most of the time, it's a systems problem, not a character problem.
So if your brain goes blank under pressure, what actually helps in the moment?
Before we get there, I want to name the hidden pattern. The brain likes to protect itself by shrinking the field of attention.
Meaning you stop seeing the full map?
Right. You see one question, one fear, one deadline, and everything else fades.
And that can feel terrifying because silence starts to sound like failure.
But silence can also mean your brain needs structure, not more shame.
Let's do a tiny practice right now. If I ask, "What matters most here?" don't answer with a paragraph.
Answer with one sentence. One. That's the whole point.
Okay, imaginary listener, try it with us. What do I actually need to decide?
See how that feels lighter? The moment you shrink the question, your brain has less to carry.
That is the first crack in the wall. You're not solving everything. You're just reducing the noise.
And that matters because a busy brain is often a noisy brain, not a wise one.
There's also something subtle here. When options stay too open, people keep hoping for certainty that may never come.
Yes, and then the delay itself becomes exhausting. The choice isn't just delayed, it's draining you.
Which is why some people finally hit a wall and say, "Enough is enough."
And honestly, that line can be healthy. It means you stop feeding the loop.
So the problem isn't only having too many choices, it's also the pressure to never be unsure.
Exactly. That's a huge part of the story. And it's why we're going to build a reset that doesn't need perfect conditions.
Because perfect conditions are a myth, and my calendar has the receipts.
Same. And by the way, there is a phrase for this whole feeling. It's called mind goes blank, and we'll unpack it more later.
For now, just remember this. Being stuck doesn't mean you're incapable.
It often means your brain is overloaded, your work memory is full, and your attention needs a better path.
So here's the big question. If your mind goes blank under pressure, should you always slow down and reset?
I think yes, because rushing usually makes the mistake bigger. A bad answer in 10 seconds is still a bad answer.
But hold on. That sounds neat, not necessarily true. What if the room is waiting, the client is staring, and you don't have time for a full reset?
Then you still need a tiny reset. Even 2 seconds is better than diving in confused.
I don't buy that completely. Sometimes pressure forces a clean decision, and if you pause too long, you can look unsure and lose trust.
Fair, but that's missing the whole picture. Applause doesn't have to look weak. It can look careful, and careful can be credible.
But what if the issue isn't clarity at all? What if the person already knows the answer and just needs courage?
Then pressure is still part of the problem, because courage disappears faster when your work memory is overloaded and your attention is split.
That's an important point. But I think people sometimes use overload as an excuse. They say, my brain went blank, when really they didn't prepare.
Preparation helps, yes. But preparation doesn't erase the fact that under pressure, even prepared people can narrow down too hard and miss better options.
So you're saying the blank moment can happen to competent people too?
Absolutely. In fact, competent people often feel it more because they care more about getting it right.
That makes sense. But here's my pushback. If we tell people their brain blanking is normal, won't they stop trying to improve?
Not if we explain it properly. Normal doesn't mean harmless, and it definitely doesn't mean stuck forever.
Okay, then tell me this. When should someone slow down, and when should they just decide?
If the cost of delay is high, decide fast. If the cost of a wrong choice is high, reset first. That's the real distinction.
That sounds reasonable, but also messy. Life doesn't come with a label saying, this is a high-cost decision.
True, which is why people need a habit, not a perfect formula.
I can agree with that part. Still, I worry that too much focus on brain science can make people feel watched by their own mind.
Or it can make them feel less ashamed. If you understand cognitive load, you stop treating every slip as a personal disaster.
That's fair. But there is another layer. Some people are exhausted, not just overloaded.
Yes, and exhaustion changes everything. A tired brain has less executive function, so it can't hold direction as well.
Wait, say that again in simple English.
Executive function is the brain's manager. It helps you pause, choose, and stay on task.
So when that manager is tired, you don't become stupid.
Right. You become less organized inside your own head.
But if the manager is tired, shouldn't the answer be rest, not a decision trick?
Sometimes, yes. But you can't always rest in the middle of a meeting, at a checkout line, or during a hard conversation.
I see the practical point, but I still think people overcomplicate the moment by trying to sound brilliant.
Exactly. And that's the trap. They start performing instead of deciding.
So maybe the real enemy is the performance instinct.
Yes, because once you're performing, your work memory is juggling tone, image, and fear of judgment, not the actual problem.
That sounds like the moment where people keep choosing, comparing, then recomparing.
And that's where narrow down becomes useful. Not because you love fewer choices, but because fewer choices are easier to hold.
But narrow down can also feel limiting. What if the best option is the one you cut too early?
Then use a minimum standard. Ask, does this work well enough? If yes, stop. If not, adjust.
So you're defending good enough thinking, not careless thinking.
Exactly. Good enough is not lazy. It's efficient under pressure.
And if someone says, I don't want to settle, what do you say?
I say settling and ending are not the same. Sometimes enough is enough, and the extra search only steals energy.
That line actually helps because it reminds people they can stop without giving up.
Yes, and that's the real shift. You don't need to win against every thought. You need a way to move.
Wow, look at us, almost agreeing.
Don't get too comfortable. I still think some people hide behind, I'll think about it when they really mean I'm scared.
And I still think some people rush because they think waiting makes them weak.
Fair, which is why the answer isn't speed or slowness by itself.
It's knowing when to pause, when to narrow down, and when to say the thought loop is done.
Exactly, that's the balance. And that's why this isn't about becoming fearless. It's about becoming clearer, even when the pressure is still there.
And later, when we teach the phrases, you'll hear how these ideas sound in natural English.
Stay with us, because one of those phrases is going to save you in real life.
So now we've seen the problem, the pressure, and the tiny reset that helps.
And we've already used the 5 expressions in real context, not as random vocabulary.
That matters because words stick when they live inside a scene.
Exactly, and now we're ready to unpack each phrase clearly.
No pressure, right?
Well, a little pressure, but the good kind.
Okay, let's bring it back to that meeting scene. The one where your mind goes blank and you suddenly sound like you've never met your own thoughts.
That's such a real image. 1 second you're ready, and the next second your brain is loading like old internet.
Right, and that's why mind goes blank is so useful. It means you suddenly can't think of anything, usually because the moment feels too heavy.
So you wouldn't use it for normal forgetfulness. You'd use it when pressure hits and your thoughts just vanish.
Exactly. My mind goes blank when I'm asked fast.
Nice, short, clear, and very natural.
And that connects straight to under pressure. We use that in the story for those situations where the clock, the room, or the question feels intense.
Yes, it means in a stressful or demanding situation. You can say, I think better under pressure, or I freeze under pressure.
I like that one because it sounds human, not dramatic.
And it works in tiny everyday moments too, not just big speeches. Also grocery shopping, texts, awkward calls.
Now the phrase that really changes the game is narrow down.
That's when you reduce choices or possibilities. You don't solve everything at once. You make the piles smaller.
Like in the tea aisle. You don't need 19 teas. You just need to narrow down to one that won't ruin your evening.
Exactly. Let's narrow down the options. That's clean, practical English.
And here's where people often get confused. They think their problem is the choice itself, but really it's the mental space.
That's work memory. It's the mental space used to hold information briefly while you think.
So if you're holding price, timing, tone, and fear all at once, your work memory gets crowded.
Right. That's why you can know the answer and still lose it for a second.
Could you say, my work memory is full?
Yes, in a casual explanation. Or, too much is going on in my work memory. That sounds natural when you're talking about mental overload.
I like that because it explains the feeling without shaming yourself.
And that's the point. You're not broken. You're overloaded.
Then we get to the phrase people love because it sounds firm. Enough is enough.
It means you've decided to stop overthinking or stop accepting a situation. It's a line in the sand.
So if you're rereading the same message for the 8th time, you can say enough is enough.
Or if you've been choosing between 3 soups for too long, same thing. Enough is enough.
I like that it can be about action or emotion. It can mean, I'm done waiting, or I'm done tolerating this.
Exactly. It's strong but not rude. It's a decision point.
Let's make all 5 feel even more real. Imagine this mini scene. Your boss asks you a question, your mind goes blank, and you feel under pressure.
Then you narrow down the question to one thing. Notice your work memory is crowded and decide, enough is enough. Here's my answer.
That's the whole episode in one breath.
And honestly, it's a very useful breath.
One more thing. The phrases get stronger when you pair them with a situation.
Right. Say, I always go blank under pressure. That sounds real because it is real.
Or, let's narrow down the choices before we decide.
Or, my work memory is full right now.
And then the power line. Enough is enough.
Short, clear, final. It has weight.
So the trick is not memorizing isolated words, it's hearing how they behave in a scene.
Exactly. Then when the real moment comes, the phrase shows up faster than panic.
That's such a relief because most people don't need more vocabulary. They need vocabulary that actually works when their brain is busy.
And these 5 do exactly that.
So today we looked at why your mind goes blank, especially under pressure, and why that doesn't mean you're bad at thinking.
We also saw that cognitive load can crowd your work memory, so clarity often comes from shrinking the moment, not fighting it.
A few practical moves can help right away. First, ask one simple question. What am I actually deciding?
Then narrow down the options fast. Don't hold 5 big choices in your head if you can write them down in 10 seconds.
Second, use your own words out loud. Even a rough sentence can reset the pressure.
And third, stop when you've got a good enough answer. If you keep searching forever, your work memory gets louder, not wiser.
I love that because it gives people permission to be human.
Same. I used to think every pause meant I was unprepared, but often I just needed a smaller question and a calmer pace.
I still catch myself overchecking simple choices, like I'm auditioning for most careful human.
And I still over-edit messages like the recipient is a panel of judges. Neither of us needs that much drama.
So here's the real takeaway. You don't need to think faster all the time.
You need a repeatable reset that helps you think clearly when the room gets loud.
Try it this week. One meeting, one message, one decision.
Notice what changes when you pause, narrow down, and say enough is enough.
And if this episode helped, that's a sign your brain isn't failing you. It's learning a better path.
Next time, we can talk about how to sound more natural when you disagree politely, because that skill saves a lot of stress too.
Before you go, we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, when does your mind go blank the fastest?
We read every single comment. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.